Raymond March of independent.org a couple weeks ago wrote a piece about the pharmaceutical industry here in the United States. And his piece is titled, "Worried About Big Pharma, Then Reduce the FDA's Regulatory Power." I want to talk to you a little bit about what he wrote and my thoughts on that, and the importance of all that. And it's really important to get that the FDA and these pharmaceutical companies pretty much end up working hand in hand. And so there was recently an announcement regarding a new Pfizer executive. Pfizer is one of the largest drug companies in the world. It's the largest one in the United States. And they recently hired a man named Scott Gottlieb, Gottlieb. Now, Scott Gottlieb, Mr. Gottlieb, was the commissioner for the Food and Drug Administration for about 2 years. About 53 days later, after announcing that he would resign, so he resigned in April saying that he wanted to spend more time with his family. And 53 days later, he announces that he's going to be working on Pfizer's advisory board. So that's a paid position in which he'll be advising Pfizer. And he'll also serve on the company's Science and Technology Committee, as well as its Regulatory and Compliance Committee. Now, you go from the commissioner of the FDA to a high-level advisor for one of the world's biggest drug companies. That's called a revolving door. If you wrote it in a book, if you wrote a thriller about white-collar crime, that plot line would be obvious. Guy quits the government job, works in the private sector, private sector tries to get favors from the government, knows all the loopholes, knows all the insides and outs, knows all the people inside. It's just too obvious. And so, of course, when they make the announcement, they say something like, we're happy to have Scott because of his expertise in healthcare, public policy, and industry will be an asset to our company and enable our shareholders to continue to benefit from a board representing a balance of experience, competencies, and perspectives. Well, he's got the inside perspective, right? And that's what counts in their business. And, this revolving door, it's been shown time and time again. There's several companies that track it. One of them you'll see if you follow the article from The Independent is this organization called STAT that tracks the relationships between the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry. Now, what's important legislatively to get is in 1962 there was something called the Kefauver Harris Amendments. And those amendments granted the FDA authority to determine whether drugs were effective and safe. So it granted the agency the power to decide which drugs were safe or unsafe and gave it more ability to discriminate between pharmaceutical firms competing to have their products approved first. So pharmaceutical firms would have something similar. They'd all have something similar in their R&D, and it'd be a race to see whose could get approved for safety first. And so now it's basically snowballed into something where they're just trying to get the quickest inside line, right? They're trying to game the system as quickly as possible. The article again notes that Dr. Mary Ruwart, in her book Death by Regulation, showed that only 10% of FDA officials left the agency for the pharmaceutical industry between 1959 and 1963. So remember, that's before the amendments. Now, after the amendments, the percentage increased to 76%, meaning that 3/4 of people that worked for the FDA ended up working in the pharmaceutical industry. right? Almost like it became a job requirement, right? A jump from 10% to 75% after this law was put in place that expanded the powers of the FDA, right? And now you might think that, well, we need an FDA to keep us safe, but there's actually plenty of third-party, independent, highly reputable testing companies out there and other businesses. For example, there are companies that test supplements and vitamins. Labdoor is a great example. There are companies that test manufacturing products, like Underwriters Laboratory, UL. There are plenty of companies that do, I'm in the construction business, and there are third-party inspectors all the time that have nothing to do with the government. And so these things can be safe. We don't need this regulatory body where, and especially where companies are spending billions of dollars in R&D, and these companies are really the only ones out there that know how to navigate the regulation because they've hired all the players from the FDA, right? There's no one in the world that can have the advantage that Pfizer now has because Pfizer hired the latest FDA commissioner.